Greetings from the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Little Flower in San Antonio, Texas. And we thank you for joining us for day 5 of this novena of reflections in preparation for the feast day of Saint Thérèse on October 1st. We are treating of different elements and themes in the little way of Saint Thérèse. Our theme for today is that of fraternal charity. Charity, as Saint Thérèse learned to live it out in the ordinary circumstances of everyday life. Saint Thérèse had heard Jesus' commandment to love one another as he had loved us. And Saint Thérèse had received the grace to realize and to trust that Jesus loved her even in her littleness, with all her weaknesses and faults, and in her own poverty. And so this realization helped her to realize that if she was to love Jesus as he loved her, then she was being called to love others in their littleness, in their poverty, in their weakness, and even with their faults. She realized that charity consists in accepting others as they are and in loving them as they are. Living in community, she shares with her sister her recognition that it's easy to love the very holy sisters in community, that everybody's willing to help them and to do anything for them. But what about the sisters who may have difficult personalities, who might be rude sometimes or ungrateful, and that by nature one might be tempted to avoid or to have as little to do with as possible? Well, Saint Thérèse realized that to show her gratitude and her love for Jesus' love for her in her littleness and weakness, that she was called to love these sisters in their poverty, in their weakness, with all their defects, to be like a good Samaritan towards them in order to care for their wounds and to heal them, and to strengthen them by the charity which she would show for them. And she tells the story of, as a novice, how she would help a sister who we might call grumpy, in her mannerisms, who the sister needed help getting from the chapel to the refectory of the monastery, the dining room of the monastery for supper. And so Saint Thérèse was called to help her, and she did. And she put up with all this sister's fussing at her, telling her, "Oh, you're going too fast, I'm gonna fall." Or if she was then trying to take her time, she would complain that Thérèse was going too slow. So, these little things that everybody deals with in their life. Saint Thérèse recognizes this is a tremendous opportunity that God was giving her to serve him and to love him, because she recalled, "Whatsoever you do for the least of my brothers or sisters, you do for me." And so Saint Thérèse says, I did this little task with the same love with which I would have done it for Jesus himself. And so in this very ordinary circumstance, Thérèse showed this extraordinary love for God. And she also used one of the parables that Jesus shares in the gospel about giving a banquet. Jesus says in the gospel, when you give a dinner or a supper, do not invite your friends or your brethren or your relatives or your rich neighbors, lest perhaps they also invite you in return, and a recompense be made to you. But when you give a feast, Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and blessed shall you be, because they have nothing to repay you with. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And so St. Therese saw this parable and interpreted it as an image for how she should practice charity in community, to love those who may not be able to love her in return in the same way, and to give this banquet of charity by the small acts of kindness, like maybe going to sit in recreation next to a sister who was unpleasant to her by nature, and to make the effort to be kind, to give this sister a big smile, or to encourage her. These are the ways that St. Therese lived this commandment to love one another as Jesus had loved us, by accepting others in their limitations, and by taking the first step to provide that banquet of charity through these ordinary means of little acts of kindness each day. And so may St. Therese help each one of us to recognize these opportunities in our day-to-day life, to spread this banquet of charity for others in our day-to-day lives.